I remember the cold. It wasn't an ordinary cold. It was the kind of cold that sank deep into your bones. A cold that made even breathing hurt. My name is Carl, and when I was sent to the Eastern Front, I was 24 years old. I thought I was strong. I thought nothing could break me. I was wrong. When we arrived, snow already covered everything. The houses were destroyed. The streets were silent, and the wind sounded like a wild animal howling between the broken buildings. We were sent into the city. They told us it would be quick. They said we would take everything in just a few days. But days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months, and the winter only grew worse. I remember the first night I truly felt that I might not survive. We were hiding inside a ruined building. There were no doors, no windows, just holes in the walls where the wind cut through like knives. My hands were so cold that I couldn't feel my fingers. I tried to move them, but they wouldn't respond. One of the men beside me, Franz, started laughing. At first, I thought he had gone mad. But it wasn't laughter of joy. It was laughter of desperation. He kept saying he couldn't feel his feet anymore. He said that was a good thing because he couldn't feel the pain anymore. The next morning, when I tried to wake him, he didn't wake up. The cold had taken him during the night. No gunshots, no explosions, just silence. That was the moment I understood that the enemy wasn't just the other army. The enemy was the cold. It was hunger. It was fear. Began to run out after a few weeks. At first, we still had bread, soup, something warm. Later, nothing. I remember staring at a small piece of bread and cutting it into 4 pieces. 4 men, 1 piece far too small. I chewed slowly, trying to make the taste last as long as possible. But the hunger never went away. It stayed there like an empty hole inside my body. One day, we found a dead horse lying in the street. I never thought I would feel relief at the sight of a dead animal. But in that moment, it felt like finding treasure. We cut pieces of frozen meat with dull knives. We ate right there. No fire, no salt. Nothing. Just tough, cold, dirty meat. But it was food. And in that war, food meant life. I began losing weight quickly. My clothes grew loose, my face became thin, and my eyes began to look like those of a stranger. I barely recognized myself anymore. I remember one night in particular. The gunfire was very close. Explosions made the ground shake, and pieces of the ceiling fell down around us. I was sitting against a wall, holding my rifle, but my hands were shaking so badly I could barely aim. A young soldier, very young, maybe 18 years old, started crying. He said he wanted to go home. He said he wanted to see his mother. I didn't know what to tell him, because I wanted the same thing. We all did, but no one said it out loud, because admitting fear felt like admitting defeat. A massive explosion struck that night. The building beside us collapsed completely. Dust filled the air grew heavy, and for a few seconds, I thought I had gone deaf. I was shouting, but I couldn't hear my own voice. When the dust finally settled, I realized that half the men who had been there were gone. Some were buried under the rubble. Others simply weren't moving anymore. I started digging with my bare hands, unable to feel my fingers, unable to feel pain, only desperation. We managed to pull 2 men out alive, but the others stayed there, buried under stone, snow, and silence. After a while, I stopped counting the days. There was no point anymore. Time itself seemed frozen, just like everything around us. All I knew was that I had to survive one more day, then another, then another. One day, we received the order to retreat. I will never forget that moment. It wasn't joy. It was relief. A relief so overwhelming, my legs almost gave out beneath me. I began walking out of that city, turning back only once. Everything was destroyed. Homes, streets, lives. And inside me, something had been destroyed too. I left that place, but I never truly left that city behind. Even now, when I feel cold, even if it's just a light chill, I remember that winter. I remember the men who stayed behind. I remember the silence. And I remember how surviving sometimes feels harder than dying.
Hi, my name is Hiroshi. When the war began for me, I was 22 years old. I remember the day I received the order to leave. My father didn't say much. He just placed his hand on my shoulder. My mother tried to smile, but I could see the tears in her eyes. I told them I would come back. But deep down, I knew I might not. We were sent to an island, a small island full of rock, dark sand, and silence. The air smelled like gunpowder and salt. They told us we had to defend that place at any cost, that there would be no retreat, no rescue, only resistance. We dug tunnels into the earth. We dug for days, for weeks, carving dark passages where barely one man could fit. The ground was hard, and the air inside the tunnels felt heavy. At night, I lay on the cold dirt, staring at the stone ceiling, thinking about home, thinking about the sound of rain hitting the roof, thinking about the smell of rice cooking. Those memories were the only things that kept me calm. Until the day they arrived. I heard the airplanes first. Distant sound, like thunder rolling across the sky. Then came the explosions. The ground shook like the island itself was dying. Rocks fell, dust filled my eyes, and the air became almost impossible to breathe. I gripped my rifle tightly, waiting. The sound of gunfire began soon after. It was loud, constant, never stopping. It felt like the whole world was being torn apart at once. We moved through the tunnels, running in the dark, stumbling, crashing into the walls. I could hear the men breathing heavily around me. Some were praying. Others stayed completely silent. Fear felt like a heavy weight inside my chest. One day, we were ordered outside the tunnel. The sun was bright, and smoke covered the sky. I saw bodies scattered across the sand. Men who had been alive just hours before, now lying still. I felt my stomach tighten, but I kept walking. Because stopping meant dying. Gunfire came from every direction. Sand flew through the air, rocks shattered, and the noise was deafening. A man beside me fell. I looked at him and saw his eyes open, but empty. I wanted to stop. I wanted to close his eyes, but I couldn't. I just kept moving, kept fighting, kept surviving. The air became hot, thick, filled with smoke and the smell of sweat. Food began to run out. Water became scarce. My throat felt dry all the time. My lips cracked. My voice grew weak. One day, I was given a small canteen of water. Very little, far too little. I looked at that water like it was something sacred. I took a small sip. Very small, trying to make it last. Because on that island, water meant life. Time lost its meaning. Days and nights blended together. All I knew was that I had to survive a little longer. One more day. One more hour. One more minute. I remember the day everything ended. The silence came suddenly. After so many days of noise, explosions, shouting, the silence felt strange, almost frightening. I stepped out of the tunnel slowly, my body exhausted, weak, covered in dirt. The sky was clear. Smoke still rose into the air, but the gunfire had stopped. I looked around and saw what remained. The island was destroyed. The men who fought beside me, many of them were no longer there. I felt a heavy weight inside my chest. It wasn't physical pain, it was something deeper, something that time could never heal. I survived. But sometimes surviving feels like carrying a heavier burden than any wound. Even now, when I close my eyes, I still hear the airplanes. I still feel the ground shaking. I still see the sand covered in silence. And I remember everything that was left behind.
My name is Thomas. When I was sent to war, I was 21 years old. I wasn't brave. I wasn't strong. I was just a young man trying to do what I was told. I remember the first time I heard real gunfire, not during training, not during drills. Real gunfire. The sound was different from what I imagined. Louder. More frightening. More real. My heart started beating so fast. I thought I might pass out. We were moving across an open field. The grass was tall, and the sky was gray. I could smell wet earth in the air. Then the shooting started. Men began falling around me. Some screamed. Others didn't even have time to react. I threw myself to the ground. My face hit the dirt, and I tasted mud in my mouth. I tried to stand, but my legs wouldn't move. The fear was too strong. A sergeant shouted for us to advance. I didn't want to, but I stood up anyway, because staying still meant dying. I started running. Running without thinking. Running without looking back. Just running. An explosion went off near me. The ground lifted, then slammed back down. A loud ringing filled my ears. For a few seconds, I couldn't hear anything. Just silence. When the sound returned, the screaming came with it. Cries for help. Cries of pain. I saw a friend, Michael, lying on the ground. He was holding his leg, bleeding badly. I ran to him. I grabbed his hand. He looked at me, fear in his eyes. He kept saying he didn't want to die. He said he wanted to go home. I told him he would be okay, even though I knew he might not be. I tried to carry him. But another explosion hit. Very close. When the dust settled, he wasn't moving anymore. I stayed there, holding his hand, not knowing what to do, not knowing what to feel. War does that to you. It takes away your ability to feel. After a while, you don't feel sadness anymore. You don't feel fear. You just keep going like a machine. Days turned into weeks. No proper sleep. Not enough food. No rest. My body was exhausted. My mind, even more. I started forgetting simple things. Names. Dates. Faces. It felt like my mind was trying to protect me, erasing parts of reality. One day, we were surrounded. Gunfire came from every direction. There was nowhere to run. I thought that would be my last day. I thought about my mother. I thought about the smell of home. I thought about quiet afternoons before the war existed. I prepared myself to die. But for some reason, I didn't. Reinforcements arrived. The gunfire slowed. The noise began to fade. And I was still alive. I sat down on the ground, staring at my dirty hands, shaking. I didn't feel victory. I didn't feel pride. Only exhaustion. A kind of exhaustion so deep, it felt impossible to stand again. When the war ended, they called us heroes. But I never felt like a hero. Heroes are the ones who come back whole. And none of us came back whole. We came back alive. But we left parts of ourselves scattered across fields, across streets, across memories. Even now, when I hear a loud noise, my heart starts racing. When I smell smoke, my body tenses. And sometimes, in the silence of the night, I remember everything. The faces, the sounds, the days that felt like they would never end. And I remember surviving doesn't mean forgetting. It means carrying the memories for the rest of your life.